Hi, it's Ned here. Thank you for joining us on Distraction. Today we're bringing you a special episode that's all about good distractions, namely books. What could be better than reading a book during the summer? Summer and books go together like gin and tonic, which is also a good summer distraction. Just not too many of them. But can't you just see yourself lying on the beach in a chair with your favorite novel, or lying in a hammock with your favorite potboiler, or reclining on your couch on a rainy day with the rain coming down on the roof and you're lost in one of your favorite novels? I can sure see myself on all of those. And along those lines, we're pleased to be able to share with you a talk with Roxanne Coady, one of our sister podcast members, Just the Right Book, Roxanne's podcast, and a talk she gave very recently where she shared her very best book recommendations for the summer. Okay, we'll now go to Roxanne Coady, recorded live at the Madison Beach Club in Madison, Connecticut.
So I'd like to open today with a poem. And the poem is called There Is, and it's by Rachel Field. Isn't it strange? Some people make you feel so tired inside. Your thoughts begin to shrivel, or like leaves, or all brown and dried. But when you're with some other ones, it's stranger still to find your thoughts as thick as fireflies, all shiny in your mind. And this is intended to be a poem about relationships in general, but it's also a poem about friendships. And women's friendships, I think, are, even if you have a bad marriage or a good marriage, or sort of doesn't matter, your friends, for most of us, become critical. So Deborah Tannen has written a new book. I don't have the title in front of me. What's it called? You're the only one I can tell. Okay. This is a must-read if you're a woman and have friends. And I'll tell you why. So, one thing that Deborah Tannen discovered when she wrote her big best-selling book, You Just Don't Understand, is that women talk more than men. Now, we could have figured that out. But the other aspect of us talking so much is we tend to talk intimately, and that also means there's the potential to say the wrong thing. So what Deborah Tannen does in this book is talk about all the different elements that are helpful in our communication style and are not helpful. So I'll give you one example I'll give you a couple of examples, but let me mention one thing. So the original definition of gossip in the Middle Ages, or when Middle English was written, is not what we think. It's actually, the definition is close friends. And it was that close friends talked a lot about their lives, and that then it evolved into gossip in a pejorative way. So a conversation that a friend and I had after I read the book, because after you read the book, you're going to want to talk to your friends. So the conversation was about when we're talking to a friend, we might bring up the life of another person, right? Maybe that hasn't happened to you, but it's happened to me. So when is talking about that other life, Susie Q, gossip in a bad way? And when is that just like we talk about ourselves in trying to learn how to live our lives and understand human nature and what's going on. So she talks about that. And the other thing she elaborates on all these things. But I was reading it when I often read, which is in the middle of the night. So I didn't call anybody, but you'll be tempted. And it's very helpful. You know, it spends time talking about relationships that go south and you don't know why, or about somebody who gets offended in a way that just doesn't make sense to you. But at the end of the day, it made me think about this. There are friends that we're with that you feel utterly you, that there isn't anything you can say that you will feel judged, that you feel free to talk about the thing that you're embarrassed about or ashamed about or proud of. And this reminded me, just hang out with those people. It's just easier. Okay. Let's talk about some fiction. I bet a lot of you have read or are reading A Gentleman in Moscow. Yes. I will say this. My husband and I are entirely different readers. He barely reads fiction. He certainly reads less than I read. We both couldn't put this book down. It's just, Amor Towles is just an exquisite storyteller. It's set in post-Russian Revolution time at a hotel in Moscow, and it's basically about an aristocrat who's under house arrest for his whole life, seemingly. But it is, if there's a book that I think will appeal to everyone, that's it. The other book that I think would appeal to everyone is Elizabeth Strout's Anything is Possible. So, how many of you have read My Name is Lucy Barton? Okay. Well, whoever hasn't read My Name is Lucy Barton needs to. What she does is manage in the simplest way possible to disclose what life is like. And in My Name is Lucy Barton, it was about her relationship with her mother. In Olive Kittredge, it was about her marriage and her relationship with her son and their neighbors. In Anything is Possible, it goes back to her hometown. So you now get to meet her siblings that were sort of referred to, family members that were referred to, and you get a better understanding of who her parents were. It is a reminder of two critical things that I think are important for us to understand all the time. One is the profound impact of our families of origin. And we can go on to be, queen of the prom, king of the mountain, but whatever was going on in that house, good or bad, will be that little demon on your shoulder or the thing that shakes you to your core. And she describes this in a way that I just think it can't help but create empathy for what people are dealing with. The other thing that she does is help us understand that lives that look small or ordinary are as complicated and rich or important as any other life. And I think it's so easy for us to inadvertently and accidentally be judging what somebody else's life is about. And she's a very good reminder to not risk doing that by helping you understand just how textured these lives are. Then the other book on here is Camino Island, John Grisham. He has sold 300 million books. 300 million books. So there's a reason his books sell. There aren't 300 million stupid people in the world. Maybe 298. And this Camino Island is the story of 5 original F. Scott Fitzgerald manuscripts being stolen from the library in Princeton, which is really where they are. And then the setting is Camino Island in Florida. And the protagonist is a woman with writer's block and a corrupt bookseller. And John and I both know the bookseller that it's based on. And I verified it. Anyway, it's just a romp. You know, it's not going to change your life. It's not going to teach you how to live a better life. But, man, you'll have a good time for a few hours reading a book. And, you know, it is... The reason James Patterson and John Grisham sell these kind of books is they know they don't have long sentences. They don't have long chapters. It's very plot-driven. You want to know what's going to happen. But you don't want to know enough to skip to the end. They're perfect. Okay, so the arrangement by Sarah Dunn. So Sarah Dunn is a young kind of, you know, she lives in the New Brooklyn up the Hudson River. And the book is about, it opens with a dinner party. So they're at the dinner party, and a couple brings up that they made an arrangement to that they each could have sex with other people, just in general. And the narrator of the story decides just in general seems like too open-ended for them, so they're going to do it for 6 months. And there's an arrangement, what they can do, what they can't do. Not what they can do sexually, but who they could do it with or where they could do. You know, they couldn't have sex in their bed. Try not to do it within their circle of friends, or maybe that was one of the conditions. Anyway, if you're ever thinking of having an open marriage or having an affair, this will give you some guidance about how it might work out. Now, I did realize one hiccup to reading this book. Kevin, my husband, knew I was interviewing Sarah Dunn for the podcast. Otherwise, he might have said, "What made you pick up that book?" So you might, if you're going to get this book, you might preface it by saying, Roxanne Coady said it would be a good book to read. Or maybe your husband's interested and it'll work out, and then you'll write your own book. Exit West by Moshe Hamid is a book that I think is extremely important. It's one of the best fiction books I've read this year. He is a Pakistani writer. The book is set in an unnamed city that becomes under siege. And there's a just exquisite young couple in love at the center of this. And the book is about immigration. But it's about immigration. It's a little bit magic realism, meaning when they emigrate, they actually go through a door, and then they're in another place. But it covers these elements of immigration. One, what it does to a relationship between a couple, what it does to your relationship with a family. But what it does is it creates interior cities and exterior cities. And the interior cities are where the naturals live, and the exterior cities are where the immigrants live. Now, I'm the child of immigrants, so I have an enormous sensitivity to the fact that it's easy to think of immigrants as like other people, you know, who don't get as upset if their kid dies, or they don't get as upset if they're, you know, because somehow they're other people. And I guarantee you, almost everybody in this room has read an article about immigration or people on ships and had a moment of distinguishing those lives from yours, right? That, oh, they probably have always lived a troubled life or whatever. a lot of these Syrian immigrants are doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs. And even if they're not, they're people with families and loves and all of that. And it's obviously a hot topic in this country at this point, and everybody's got a different point of view, and I might try to convince you of my own. But what I would urge you to do is read this book and think about what this really looks like, boots on the ground, when they're in their country and have no choice but to become refugees, and what it looks like when they're here. So if I were to pick one of these fiction books that I think is most important to read, I would say it's Exit West. We talked about John Grisham and James Patterson for Can't Put Down books, but Michael Connelly, both of these books are fantastic. The Wrong Side of Goodbye is Michael Connelly's normal protagonist, Bosch, and he's hired by a gazillionaire guy because it turns out that in a way that he enormously regrets, that he fathered a child with a young Mexican girl, and then they, for reasons that are not explained at the outset, but you can figure this out, she and the child are not in their lives. And he's dying, and he wants to leave all his gazillion badillion dollars to that woman and that child, and he hires Bosch to find them. And I just had the best time reading this book. And it's got perfect twists and turns, and it was great. The Late Show is his newest book, and this one has a female protagonist. She's an LAPD detective. Her name is Renee Ballard, and she filed charges against her lieutenant superior for sexual harassment. So she was shifted to what they call the Late Show, meaning the overnight shift in Hollywood. And this is about a couple of crimes that she's going to get in trouble for again. So this is a new series. You'll totally enjoy her. And so if you want that kind of Can't Put Down book, I'd recommend that. The memoirs. Queen Victoria. So it's a doorstop of a book, and it is one of the best biographies I've ever read. So think about this with Queen Victoria. At the height of the British Empire, when she was the queen for 25% of the world's population, right? 25%. She was also the queen for 64 years. So the prime ministers she worked with were Gladstone and Disraeli and Melbourne and Peel, and just an extraordinary array. She had 9 children. She was madly in love with her husband. She loved sex. After her husband died, she took on another lover who, she found in the castle or wherever she was. But she was a queen with enormous intelligence, a steady hand, a real sense of what was right for her people. Why the Victorian era is considered this sort of buttoned-up thing when you read this biography. And to me, biographies are one of the most interesting, exciting ways to read about history. And if you're going to pick up one doorstopper this summer, I would absolutely encourage you to pick up this biography of Queen Victoria. Okay, memoirs. Daphne Merkin became renowned for a piece she wrote in the New Yorker in the early 2000s about her really severe depression. A lot of times when we hear that somebody's depressed, we don't quite put it in context. Because depressed could be, you had a bad day. We use that word. And we use it too loosely. Or sometimes, now go back to this female friendship, somebody's depressed and we think, oh, they just need to like buck up, they need to take a walk, they need to do something. But the number of people in our country that are dealing with debilitating depression or debilitating anxiety or temporarily debilitating anxiety, something like 40% of the people in the country. So the odds of among us there being people dealing with this is pretty high. So what Daphne does in this book is help you understand what that really looks like. So if you are this person, you will be comforted by how she copes with it or deals with it, and she's been hospitalized. If there's someone in your life dealing with it, you'll understand better what they're dealing with. And if you don't know someone or you don't think you know someone, it will make you more empathetic about the possibility that this is what somebody's dealing with. And she's just a fantastic, fantastic writer. So now, lastly, I'll cover to think about, the last of them. How propaganda works. I'm going to read you something. So I was fascinated by, I read a review of this in the New York Times, and I thought, this is interesting. So Michiko Kakutani wrote the review, and she opens the review this way. In Mein Kampf, Hitler argued that effective propaganda appeals to the feelings of the public rather than to their reasoning ability, relies on stereotyped formulas repeated over and over and over again to drum ideas into the minds of the masses, and uses simple love or hate, right or wrong formulations to assail the enemy while making intentionally biased and one-sided arguments. And the purpose of propaganda, and this is a history of how propaganda works, and Jason Stanley, who wrote it, is a linguistics professor at Yale. So the purpose of propaganda is for you to lose confidence in any other news other than in the entity or person propagandizing. And when you read this, you realize how slippery a slope. We think of propaganda in the overt way, but this helps us understand propaganda in the much more subtle way. And then if you really want to just forget sleeping for a week, pair this book with How Tyranny Works, which is a little pamphlet of a book. But again, if we're going to be active citizens engaged in life, these are two very important books to read. How Propaganda Works is not as light and breezy as I just made it sound. Jason is an academic, but it is worth reading. And if you get tired of reading it, I also interviewed him for the podcast, so you can. He's a chatty guy, but he's extremely interesting. So this book called World's Best Life Hacks, I found it in the bookstore, and I love things like this that just have Heloise hint things. So I'll read you a couple, but you have to check out the book. So it turns out that you can make whipped cream if you're missing a whisk by putting everything in a jar and shaking it for 3 minutes. I didn't know that. Or if you've cored an apple, but you because you want to get it done before people come, but you don't want it to, turn brown, just put a rubber band around it. Yeah. See, aren't you glad I'm here? Or if you leave a wooden spoon across a pot with boiling water, it won't overflow. Now, I think maybe the wooden spoon will go on fire and your house will burn down, but I don't know. Okay. It's been lovely seeing you again.
All right, so what did you think? Lots of great books mentioned. Our thanks to Roxanne Coady and Just the Right Book for working with us on this episode, and I hope you take some time to allow yourself to have a few good distractions this summer. We all need them. Until next week, thanks for listening. Distraction is produced by Collisions, the podcast division of CRN International. Collisions, podcasts for curious people. Our audio engineer is the incredibly talented Scott Person. Our producer is the beautiful and also incredibly talented Sarah Gurton. And our music theme was created by the very talented Mark Berman.